So basically, I want to start out with getting a little bit of where you grew up
Okay.
around the time, like right before you enlisted into the Army.
Okay.
Just whenever you're ready.
Okay.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay.
I have 5 brothers and 2 sisters. My mother and father came from Somerset, Kentucky. 5 of us served in the service. 4 of us were in World War II. I went into the service January 13th, 1945, and served until July 1958.
And how old were you when you enlisted for World War II?
19 years old.
And just kind of briefly, what was your service during World War II?
World War II, I took my basic training at Camp Fannin, Texas. That's located near Tyler, Texas. When I got through basic training there, I was assigned as a instructor in the bayonet assault course. And after that, I stayed there 2 months. And after that, I had orders to go to the Pacific. I left Seattle July the 21st, 1945. And we were in the Pacific when the atomic bomb was dropped. In other words, all the islands in the Pacific had been secured at that time, including our destination of Okinawa.
So you never saw any combat? You were
No.
more of an occupation?
No, I didn't. I was on the very last of World War II, yes. I didn't see any combat.
Okay. And you were in the infantry, though, at that time?
Yes, I was, yes.
Okay.
I served with the 27th Infantry Division, the 105th Infantry.
Kind of tell me a little bit of what it was like just in the States before the Korean War broke out. Like kind of what was going on, what you were doing.
I was in Japan when the Korean War broke out. I was in a military government unit on the island of Honshu, that is below Hokkaido. At that time, we were phasing the military government units out and calling them civil affairs teams. And in 1949, they started phasing them out. And I went, at that time, I was transferred to Sapporo, Japan, where I worked in special services with the special service unit. I was not in the 7th Division on the 25th of June when the Korean War started.
Now, do you remember where you were when you first heard about the Korean War?
Yes, I was in the barracks.
Can you kind of describe that to me, what your reaction was?
Our reaction was we started digging foxholes. We were on the northern tip of Hokkaido, and at that time we were right across from the Bering Strait, Russian-held territory. We thought we ought to start digging in at that time. This was at Camp Crawford, Japan.
So you guys thought that you may be attacked?
Yes, we were. Yes, we had to be safety in that regard. Yes.
Now, did you hear it from someone telling you, or through the radio, or how did you hear about the Korean War being started?
No, we heard by radio. Yes, we had a radio station there at Camp Crawford.
And do you remember your first reaction, what you were thinking when you first heard that?
Yes, my first reaction was, well, it won't be long, you know. This won't last long, because we do have a lot of troops in Korea. But that turned out to be a false impression I had. It lasted a lot longer than I thought it would.
So you believe that there was a pretty strong American force in Korea?
Yes, I did, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so kind of now tell me a little bit about, so you were in Japan, you heard the Korean War broke out. What was kind of going on between then and when you went over to Korea?
Well, when in June the 25th, when this first broke out, a lot of World War II veterans that had MOSs like machine gunners and expert riflemen, they were shipped out south to other units, like the 1st Cavalry Division, 25th Division, and the 24th Division, to go to beef up the units that were going before the 7th Division. So the 7th Division was actually depleted of some of its good men before it went to Korea, and they had to be replaced. And I ended up being one of the replacements.
For the 7th Division?
Yes, for the 7th Division.
Okay, so tell me about that experience, about coming into the 31st.
Well, coming into the 31st, we started training, night walking, concertina wire things, and the unit was quite short of men at that time, and not, I would say, not nearly combat ready to go to war. And we found that out later and as we went there, because when we got on the side of Mount Fuji and started getting replacements from Korea, here we were with men that hadn't never fired a weapon, couldn't speak English, and here I was with them, and I only had an interpreter to tell me, I would tell them what I wanted. And the only thing that they ever seen with a weapon was we watched a platoon and infantry attack on the side of Mount Fuji, which never happened in Korea as far as our unit was concerned.
Now, were you a squad leader at that time? When
I
joined?
yes, I was a staff sergeant squad leader.
Okay.
I had 4 Americans and 6 South Koreans.
So tell me a little bit about that, arriving there, being assigned your men, what you first thought of your men.
What I could describe my men, they were good. They were excellent men, the 4 were. As far as the Koreans, before we got the Koreans, I wouldn't say, you know, it's, when you don't have your full complementary staff of men, it's hard to go through your rotation of what you want to do or where you want to move, you know, to firing positions and stuff like that.
Now, did you get the Katusas right at the same time as you got your 4 American soldiers? Were they assigned at the same time?
No, no.
So you picked them up at a later date?
Yeah, we picked them up after we went from Hokkaido to Mount Fuji.
Okay.
That's where we picked up the South Koreans.
And that's where you went to train?
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about that, your first kind of, you know, what you thought about the Katusas when you picked them up, what they were like.
Well, they didn't speak English. I had one that spoke very good English, and I would have to tell him what I wanted. And they didn't know how to hold a weapon. Evidently, they were picked up off the street in South Korea and shipped to Japan to be with us, to go back to Korea. And the first night in Korea, we found out just how inexperienced they were, because anytime something would move, they would start firing. And I was scared at night to go check them, but thinking maybe I might be the enemy also.
Now, so you had 6 South Koreans, and did you have a translator for your?
Yes, I had a translator, yes.
Assigned specifically to your squad?
Yes.
Okay. And how well of English did he speak?
Very good. Very good English. Perfect English.
And how was he as a soldier? Was he a good soldier? Was he just basically just there for translation?
I would say he was just a good translator. As far as soldiers are concerned, no.
So what, now, you got this group, you got the translator. Tell me about going into training and what it was like working with the translator and the other Katusas and stuff like that.
They pretty much obeyed what he said. They went along with what he said, what I told him, and him transparent to them. They went along with that okay. We didn't have any problem in that respect. But I think the first time that they had fired a weapon was when we got to Korea, and we found a cave where we could take them and just shoot into it. Other than the first night we were in the, after we made the Incheon landing, where they were just firing at anything.
Now, what was the age groups on the South Koreans that you had?
I would say they were in their 20s. Yes.
Now, do you remember much about like the way they acted or communicated between each other, or just kind of?
Yeah, they were mostly, they had to communicate with each other in their own language, which was Korean. And then sometimes I would ask the interpreter their, what they were saying, and, and the answer would be they're going along with this. Where they picked them up at to come to Japan, I don't have any idea. Whether they picked them up off the street or they volunteered or anything like that.
Now, your translator, did you know much like about, did you talk to him a lot? Did you know much about where he was from, or?
No, I didn't. I didn't have any idea where he was from.
Okay. So, describe to me a little bit about the training that you guys did on Mount Fuji and what went along around that time period.
There was no training on Mount Fuji.
Oh, okay.
The only thing we saw was an infantry and tank attack from the bleachers. That was it. The rest of the time was getting our gear ready to get on board ship to go to Korea.
So you guys didn't have any time to train?
No.
And what were you thinking at that time, that you had these guys that never fired a rifle, never been through basic, and they're going to send you right off in the middle of
A disaster waiting to happen. In fact, when you lose your key NCOs to, at this time, to other divisions that are in Korea, you're really hurting your morale and stuff like that of the men that's left behind. Because new men coming in that don't know you. I didn't know them before until I went in August of 1950. And we landed in Incheon September the 15th.
So basically you were getting your gear issued, and then you got on the ship to go to Incheon.
Yes.
And you were assigned to headquarters company at that time, right?
Headquarters company, 3rd Battalion, yes.
Okay. Explain to me a little bit, and for the people who aren't as familiar with military type things, you were a squad leader, and there was how many squads in headquarters?
At that time, the Army was a triangle. 3 squads to a platoon, 3 platoons to a company, 3 companies to a battalion, 3 battalions to a division. Everything was in threes, a triangle they call them. I honestly believe that to be efficient in a fighting unit, you have to have training together. You have to know your men. Evidently, they thought maybe we weren't going to meet that much combat, the reason that we was sent in like this. Now, I'm not sure about the 1st Marine Division. I don't know whether they had South Koreans with them or not. I don't believe they did.
So the 3 or the 4 Americans that were in your squad, did you get to know them while you were in Japan, or very much at all?
No, I sure didn't.
So what was, I'm sure at this time you had your doubts of the situation. Did they convey to you, kind of asking you what's going on, this doesn't seem right, why are we not?
No. They were pretty confident that we could handle the situation.
And they were pretty confident in your leadership too?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Did you get to know your platoon leader very much?
Yes. Lieutenant Bernard, was a very good platoon leader. I had the P&A, we were the P&A platoon, Pioneer and Ammunition. We're the ones that took the ammunition into the reservoir.
What was he like? What do you remember about him?
He was a young lieutenant at that time. I imagine pretty close to my age.
Now, did he was he the one that was communicating to you where you guys were going, what your orders were?
Oh yes, he's the one that yes. Mm-hmm. He's the one that gave us the orders. Always come down to him, where he wanted to put the ammunition trucks and things like that. Yes.
So, did you convey to him any of your like questioning of what was going on and things like that? Did you have much conversation between that?
We had meetings once in a while on what was our next move, and I think sometimes he was in the dark as much as all of us, waiting for decisions.
And did he pretty much let you know that hey, I'm in the dark, and
Yes.
we'll get through this?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so basically, so you guys loaded onto a ship to go to Incheon.
Mm-hmm.
Describe to me, or just kind of tell me about that experience of the travel on the ship, what you guys did.
We were quite crowded on this travel of the ship. In fact, I came down with dysentery on the ship and was put in to the hospital there for just one night. And but it was crowded. We had to take turns eating. We had equipment aboard with us. Played cards. We didn't know that we were going to Incheon. Before we arrived at Incheon, the mouth of the harbor, the Marines had already landed there, and the 32nd Infantry had already gone ashore with them and had taken Incheon and were on their way to take Seoul. And my unit boarded and went out to Suwon and took the airstrip there.
Now, what was, kind of describe to me what like the sleeping quarters were like?
It's crowded, very crowded, yes.
Now, you said you guys rotated to do, was that by platoon to eat?
Yes, mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess you might call them compartments.
Now, did your guys' platoon, did you guys all sleep in the same area together?
Yes.
Now, were the Katusas in like right in there with you guys also, or were they separated?
Yes, they were. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now you said you played cards. What other activities did you guys do on the boat to kind of pass time?
What did they do?
Or what did you do?
We played mostly pinochle. Yeah, that was our game of choice.
Did they have any movies or anything like that they showed?
Any what?
Any movies on the ship?
No, I don't remember seeing a movie on that ship, no. That was a very short trip.
So about how many days?
I think it was 2 or 3 days.
2 or 3?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm actually going to jump from, so basically you landed in Incheon, went to Suwon, captured the airstrip. What was kind of your order of operations after that?
After we went ashore, our operations were just, you would move one day and stop overnight. At that time, the 1st Cavalry Division had broken out of the Pusan perimeter, they called it. And we headed south at that time to meet them, to link up with them. We went across the mountains of Korea, and the 1st Cavalry went through us, and we went south.
Now, did you guys meet much resistance going south?
No.
Did you guys meet much resistance when you took the airfield at Suwon?
No. Some of the companies did, yes, but not ours.
So you pushed south to link up with the 7th Cavalry?
Yeah, that's the 1st Cavalry Division, yes.
Okay. And after that, what was kind of your order?
We went on to Pusan, where we started cleaning gear and getting ready to board another ship.
So tell me, how many days did you spend in Pusan?
I think it was about 4 or 5 days.
Now, was this on a ship waiting, or did you guys have a camp?
We had a camp outside of Busan. Yeah, we had a camp outside of Busan, and this was the first time we met Colonel McLean. That later on you'll probably get to him, but this is the first time we've seen Colonel McLean. He had relieved Colonel Ovenshine, who went into the Incheon with us.
So, was there other units that combined with you guys at that time, or replacements or anything like that?
We were just by ourselves at that time, the 31st Infantry.
So you said McLean came. Did anybody else come into the unit?
No, Colonel McLean was the first at that unit that time. He took command of the 31st Infantry.
So at that time, you guys basically had the same strength as what you did when you went to Chosin.
Yes.
Okay.
Our first casualty was a 2.5-ton truck overturned on that encounter there.
Okay. Where was the 32nd at that time? Were they
The 32nd had gone to Seoul to help take the city with the 1st Marine Division.
Okay.
Now after that, when they went after that, I don't know.
Okay. So, kind of tell me about those several days at Busan and what was kind of going on and what you guys were thinking and that kind of just.
Well, we were thinking maybe the war might be just about over. In fact, the rumor did go through there that the Korean War had stopped. And we were all hollering and yelling but that turned out to be false.
Now, do you remember, like, so you would say, like, a lot of the people were having a good time, joking, kind of
Yes.
laid back?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Do you remember much about what the guys were doing? Or, you said they were talking about the war being over. Do you remember them talking about any other kind of stuff at that time?
No, at that time, in fact, we even had a USO show there at that time.
Do you remember who was there?
It was just some amateurs, made up of amateurs, nobody in particular.
So very, very laid back. You guys weren't really worried.
Oh, yes, yeah.
About the war.
Yeah, that nobody was,
So
everybody was at ease, happy, smiling. We went into Incheon, got us some beer, brought back.
So after those several days, you guys loaded back up on the ship.
Yes, we thought we were going back to Japan.
You thought you were going.
Yes, but we went to Iwon. That was north of Hamnung.
Now, okay, because this was Operation Yo-Yo, where you guys got stuck on the sea for several days.
Mm-hmm.
Really, just describe to me kind of what that experience was like. This second trip on the ship.
The second trip on the ship was we didn't know where. We knew we were going to North Korea, but we didn't know where. We were apprehensive. We didn't know whether it was going to be a beach landing that you'd be under fire or that. But once we got on the ship, we had found out that the 17th Infantry had already gone ashore at Iwon and was pushing towards the Yellow River. And the 31st Infantry was going to go up to the reservoir above the Chosin Reservoir, which we did.
And that was the Fusan Reservoir, right?
Yes, the Fusan Reservoir, yes. That's where we encountered our first Chinese at that place, yeah.
So tell me about just the whole traveling experience from Busan to Iwon. Like, how many days do you think you were on the ship?
I would imagine 3 or 4 days, yes.
So not much longer than.
No, just, yeah.
Was it a pretty similar experience as the last one? You guys
No,
just play cards?
it was
or?
about the same. Go over the side of the ship on the landing craft and go ashore.
Now, did you guys ever do any training on the ship?
No.
No running?
No.
So pretty much, did you guys stay underneath and just play cards the majority of the time?
Mm-hmm.
Or?
It was relaxing, yes.
Now, did you guys ever run into any any mines, like have to do any, because I've read some places where they have assigned some soldiers to watch on the starboard for mines, and that area was heavily mined. Did you ever?
No, no.
Okay, so describe to me now. Did you ever have much? Did you see McLean much?
No, that's the only time I ever saw McLean, Colonel McLean, was at the Busan perimeter.
What was your first kind of perception of him?
Well, he carried the swagger stick. He looked very professional. Colonel McLean did, yes. Very, very professional officer.
So your platoon leader, what was his name again?
Lieutenant Bernard.
Bernard. What was he kind of communicating to you guys at that time?
Actually, there wasn't too much communication. Most of the officers, probably the officers to officers, but not to come down to what we were going to do and our orders or anything like that. At that time, I don't believe we had any orders, unless.
Now, was this pretty typical since you were in World War II? You were used to kind of not knowing what was going on?
No. During World War II, it was completely different. Of course, I was in the last of World War II. But they told us what to expect.
So did that concern you at all? How you used to have this communication, and then now it was kind of, you were not knowing what was going on?
I'm not going to say we didn't have good communication,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't think they knew also. I think they were probably just as in the much dark as we were, and they're not going to tell us something that they don't know. I don't think so.
So did you guys have a feeling that the North Korean army had been defeated, the war was over?
Yes, that was yes.
And when you guys landed at Ewon,
We're going to be home for Christmas.
And when you guys landed at Ewon, did you know you were going to be landing there, or was that?
No, didn't have any idea.
So what were you guys thinking once you landed there? What was kind of going on?
Yeah, we didn't know how far inland we were going to go. Didn't know how we were going to get out after we went in there. And we went over the mountains there, over the top of the mountains. It must have been 40 degrees at that time on top of that mountain. Didn't dare cry. If you did, your tears froze. It was colder than the reservoir. We had towels wrapped around us, and our breathing had ice across the towels, and your eyebrows were frozen. And
so you guys were still in normal. You didn't have winter gear at the time.
no,
And what were you thinking once now when did you landed on the beach and at Ewon, and what was basically did you guys just unload, get things together, get the trucks loaded? What was kind of going on?
we unloaded. The port had already been secured. We unloaded and started getting our stuff ready to move inland. Yes, get organized, yes.
And where was the first place you guys went from Ewon?
I'll tell you, I couldn't mention the names now. They were small places. Sometimes we'd go on foot, sometimes we'd go by truck. It all depended.
So you hit several villages on the way to Fusan.
Yes.
Was there many people there? Were the North Koreans greeting you?
Oh, this was, you mean after Incheon, on the way to Busan?
No, from Ewon up to Fusan.
No.
So did you guys go straight up there?
Yeah, we went straight up. Most of us walked up the mountain.
Describe kind of what it was like, what you remember about when you first entered North Korea in the mountainous area.
Cold. This was October is when we went into the mountains. Wasn't bad. In fact, it was fairly decent weather but once it came November and around Thanksgiving, we were up into the 40 and 35 and 40 below zero. We had Thanksgiving up there at I think it was on the 23rd, 1950. We had turkey, all the dressings and everything, but you had to eat it in a hurry, or it was frozen.
So, when you guys started from E1, you set up on foot to Fusan, and as you were going up there, that's when the temperature started to change.
Yes, yes, the last of October, yes.
And what was the men saying about it?
Yeah. At that time, they weren't saying too much. It was just a normal routine going from a small village to a small village. That's where you stayed, into something where there was no one.
So, but you guys didn't, at Fusan, was there an actual village there that you guys stayed at?
Yes, there was. In fact, we stayed in this, and at the same time, the 57th Artillery was firing 105 howitzers at the enemy. And it didn't bother us at all. We didn't pay much attention to it. It was just a normal routine.
Where were they at that time, firing from?
I don't know, but they said that they were using horses to pack the weapons up to them, or ammunition up to them.
Oh, so this was the Chinese firing artillery?
No.
Oh, okay.
The Americans were.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, was there any villagers at the Fusan Reservoir? Was there any North Koreans around?
No. Didn't see anyone.
And that's when you guys first ran into the Chinese, right?
Yes.
So, kind of just tell me about when first arriving and the time that you spent at the Fusan Reservoir, and then just as much detail as you can remember.
Yeah. When we went in E1, we got our gear, transportation together, got organized, and then took off. We stayed there that night at the port. The next morning we moved out. And we would go from village to village, and sometimes we'd get our information from a plane flying over and drop us information, what they wanted to tell us. Where to go to and what to expect. We would stop at a village and they would send out patrols. We'd send out Lieutenant Boyer's team to patrol. Sometimes they'd go 35 and 40 miles ahead of us. And they'd be gone all day and come back that evening and give the report. And then we'd move out the next morning.
Now, so tell me about when you guys first made contact with the Chinese.
The first time we made contact with the Chinese, I lost a real good friend. He was Lieutenant Halverson from G Company of the 31st. The Chinese attacked them. They were ahead of us at this time. And I knew him through the sports at the Hokkaido there in Sapporo, Camp Crawford. He was the first one we lost that I can remember. And the word came back, and I think that's when it really hit home to most of us. Hey, this is a real war we're in now.
So was this on a patrol, or were you guys?
No, we would go by foot, no patrols. We would send out patrols, but most of us would just go, being we had the ammo, we had to stay close to the command post where we could get ammo to whoever needed it.
So you said this friend of yours in G Company, now how did the Chinese did they hit you guys on foot?
Yes, they were on foot, and they went into a village. And when they went into the village, they knew something was wrong, but the Koreans started running. And that's when the Chinese ambushed them. Yeah.
From houses or up on the hills or?
Out of the homes.
Now, but you were away from G Company.
Yes, we were in the rear, moving with them.
So basically, was he just brought back after the skirmish ended?
Yeah,
That's when you found
yeah,
out.
yes. That stopped us for that night. That skirmish stopped us for that night. We didn't move again until the next morning.
And where were you guys? Were you guys on your way to Fusan, or were you on your way back
On
down?
our way to Fusan.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, when you guys first hit this ambush of Chinese, and how many do you know about how many was actually in the village? Was it a large number? Or?
I think there was about 8 or 10 in that village, and they were eliminated. They got off mortar fire right away and killed them. None of them escaped.
Now were you guys traveling as a convoy at that time? with the
Most,
drugs?
yes, it was mostly a convoy. Yes,
And
kind of leapfrogging each other.
and
Yeah.
G Company just happened to be at the
G
lead.
Company was the lead. Yes.
Okay. So after this happened, after they got ambushed, what was kind of going on through, like, was it communicated to you that they were Chinese?
Yes. Hmm. Yes. It became a more serious war then. That we had heard about the Chinese, but we didn't realize that they were there at them numbers.
So at that point, you guys realized that the Chinese were actually fighting and weren't a volunteer.
Yes, realized at that time we were fighting the Chinese. Yes.
Even though it was a small numbers, you guys.
Yes. Yes. They were not volunteers. They were strictly Army Chinese. Yeah.
So did you guys talk about, like, I mean, or is it just, okay, you guys knew that the Chinese had entered the war, but you were just going to keep doing what you were told to do?
Hmm. Yeah. At that time we became more alert. More alert. We had to make sure that somebody was awake all night. Check the men. Make sure somebody, if there was 2 men together, make sure one of them was awake. At that time, it became a more serious situation.
Now, did you know how, like, McLean and his staff was reacting to this? Did you have any idea?
No, I didn't. No, sure didn't. I know. I knew. I knew Colonel Bill Riley. He was my commanding officer, 31st Regiment, 31st 3rd Battalion. Colonel Riley was. He was a West Point officer, a very good officer. And I was usually at the CP where the decisions were being made.
So you were around it, so you knew what was going. You heard them talk about it.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember any of the conversations at all?
No, I don't, but I remember that the company commanders from the company coming to the CP to discuss the next moves, and Captain Etchemendy from L Company, who now lives in Reno, Nevada, Captain Kitts. I knew them. I didn't know Captain Jordan. That would have been M Company commander where Colonel Gray was from. And I Company, I don't remember the company commander of that one.
Now, the headquarters at each time was just some random hut that they chose.
It usually chose a home, yes.
Now, in this convoy, where was McLean usually? Was he usually up front, or?
You know something? I did not meet McLean I did not see Colonel McLean after the Pusan.
Ever?
No, never. Not until the Chosin Reservoir.
Not till Chosin.
Yes.
Okay. So you guys are on your way to Fusan. You come into the Chinese ambush. What happened after that?
Well, after that, we went on to the reservoir. That's where we contacted more Chinese and started artillery fires and stuff like that. And evidently they had pockets of them and trying to get them out. At that time, we were trying to protect the 17th Infantry. It already moved to the Yellow River. At that time, we were on their flank, and we were also north of the 1st Marine Division. what we're trying to do is cut the roads.
You guys were trying to cut the roads? Or
Yeah,
they were?
to keep the enemy from coming down the road, yes.
Okay, trying to keep them open.
Yes.
To keep the MSR.
Mhm.
So were you guys, eventually, did you stop somewhere at the Fusan Reservoir, or were you still?
Yeah, there was a little village at the Fusan Reservoir, that I don't remember the name. It was quite a good sized village where the 3rd Battalion stayed there, I think 2 or 3 days. We stayed there 2 or 3 days until we got our orders to go back to the ocean, the beach.
So at this time, when you guys dug in at the Fusan Reservoir? Did
No,
you-
we didn't dig in. We lived in homes. There was no digging in.
So
Not with my unit.
So were you guys running into were Chinese actually coming at night or anything when you guys were
The
there?
Chinese weren't attacking us, no.
But
No.
Were you running into them though on patrols and things?
Yes. Hmm. Yeah, we were still sending out patrols, yes.
Do you remember was it just basically a patrol would go out and they would get into a small skirmish?
Yeah, small skirmish. We had one Jeep with Lieutenant Boyer, another Jeep machine gun, and I think there was about 5 men patrol.
Did you ever have to go out on any of those patrols?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
No, I never, no.
So, tell me about going from Fusan back to the beach and kind of what was going on.
Well, at that time, we're talking about real cold weather coming in. And going back over the mountains, it was solid ice. The 2.5-ton trucks were no covers over them, just a regular open truck that the men had to ride in. And that was terrible. The weather was getting to most of them. We'd get out of the vehicle and throw a can of gas on the road and set it afire and get warm that way and get back in the truck and take off.
So you said it was getting to the men. How, was this in the way were they talking about it? Just the way they were just...
Nobody said much about it. I guess if we didn't like it, we didn't say anything. We didn't say anything because we were going to be home for Christmas, supposedly, and we wanted to just do it and get it over with. But you never heard anybody griping about the cold. You saw them changing their socks, trying to keep their weapons where they would fire. Keep their weapons close to the body to keep them warm.
Now, when you guys first hit the Chinese, did everybody kind of think that you guys were not going to be home by Christmas at that time?
Yes. Yeah, it began to change, yes. Yes.
Now, what were you doing to kind of help your men cope with the cold? Were you giving them suggestions? Did you know kind of what to do to kind of deal with that, or was that?
Yes. We you have training in cold weather, like socks, dry socks, changing your socks. At that time, we had the new shoe they called the shoe pack, and your feet would sweat quite a bit in them, especially after a long march, and you had to take them off at that time, or you were in deep trouble.
Did you have any guys at that time running into frostbite or cold weather problems?
No. The only thing about it, the weather was cold, but it didn't put anybody out of commission.
So, describe to me a little bit about how the cold weather was, what it was doing to the weapons and the vehicles and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, actually, the cold weather, we were not prepared for this cold weather. We had the outer garment, but we didn't have the inside garment for the cold weather stuff. We had ski material, but we didn't have the padding that goes inside of it. We only had the shell. We had ski gloves with no fingers, just a thumb. The only thing we had to protect us that was the best was the shoe pack, which had just been issued for the cold weather. But, and we weren't near equipped with cold weather gear as we should have been. In fact, when we got to the Chosin Reservoir, we saw the Marines with their big parkers and liners, and we wish we had some of that.
Now, do you remember any of the conversations you guys were having at the time or anything like that? Was there still laughter and joking around? And
No, it was, I think we were pretty much serious. We didn't do much talking with each other. We knew then, I think, what to expect, what was coming. Be prepared as much as we possibly could. Be more alert. Make sure your weapon was clean and ready to go.
so did you guys remove the oil from your weapons at that time?
Yes, I had an M2 carbine. Yes.
So from Fusan, you guys went back down to Iwan?
We went back to one city where we got on in boxcars. And they took us to Ham Nung. This was all in one day now. We went back over the mountain, back to the coast, got on boxcars, went to Ham Nung, into the reservoir the same day.
So what was these mountains like? Were they just...
Coming over the mountains in a 2.5 ton truck, dual wheels, one tire was over the mountain. The road was that narrow. I heard at one time where they were using tanks to cut off a part of a bend off of the road so the truck could get around it. I didn't see that, but that's what I heard.
So you guys went back to Ham Hung, and that's when you guys started heading up to the east side of the reservoir?
Yes, our orders were to go to the Chosin Reservoir and relieve the 5th Marines who were on the east of the reservoir, on the inlet.
Now, as you guys were moving up, the Marines were coming out.
As I didn't see this, but the advance party did. They met each other. 5th Marines coming out and the 32nd going in.
Do you remember anybody talking about that? What was said between them, or
The only thing that I can say about that is what I've read, what was said between them. That I think the Marines told them, yes, there was Chinese in the area, and they had small skirmishes with them, but nothing significant.
And when you guys moved up there, it was turning night, wasn't it?
The 27th of November.
When you moved up to
The evening of the 27th, yes. We arrived in the Chosin Reservoir.
So describe to me tell me about that, about moving. Actually, would you want to drink of water or anything?
No,
Are you
no.
good? Okay. So tell me about moving in to the east side of the reservoir and kind of into the Marines' positions and kind of what was going on at that time.
We went up from Ham Nung up 2.5 ton trucks, up Nakong Pass, the big pass there where the bridge had been blown out. And just like before, we'd pour a can of gas on the ground and get warm, get back in the truck and take off again. We arrived, it was getting dark when my unit arrived in the east of the Chosin Reservoir. We built a fire. That's how we felt, a large fire. And that night is when the Chinese overran us.
Now, you built a fire right outside you guys' position.
Right outside, yes.
Now, was there holes already dug, or did you guys have to dig in?
No, we couldn't dig in. The ground was completely frozen.
Did you even try, or was it just pretty
No,
much?
they just, we were going to jump off the next morning. This was just an overnight stay. The next morning we were going to attack the road, go through the 32nd infantry where they were all way ahead of us. and leapfrog them and take off.
Now, you said you guys built a fire. Were you guys not worried at all that
No, not worried one bit.
you were just more worried about keeping warm?
Yes.
So describe to me about the night that night when the Chinese hit, what you were doing, what was going on.
Mm. On the book of Chosin, you'll see a home on it, on the inlet. There's a Jeep parked in front of that home. That was my company commander's Jeep. That's the home that my company commander, my platoon leader, and myself and some more NCOs slept in on the night of the 27th when the Chinese attacked us. We could hear rifle fire from a distance, but then it started getting closer. What had happened is the Chinese had penetrated K Company, I Company, and L Company, and had overrun them, and the Chinese were between us and the infantry companies. And we didn't know who the enemy was at that time because the South Koreans were coming back to us at that time. But we soon found out what the Chinese looked like because they had fur parkas with white around the face. And in fact, they were hollering. And I asked my interpreter, what are they saying? He says, that's not Korean they're talking to. And I said, oh, it's Chinese.
Now, you were asleep.
Yes, we were all in our sleeping bags, yes.
And you were awakened by the rifle fire?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And what was, when you first were awakened, what was going through your head?
At first, I thought it was just the normal thing. The Koreans firing at something that wasn't there. That was the first thing I thought. But that turned out not to be true because Captain Kitts had already fallen back and told us that his company had been overrun. And at that time, and in fact, the time he got back there, our company had been overrun also. Our battalion command had been overrun. Colonel Riley had been wounded. The officer with him had been killed. Colonel Riley had been wounded 3 times and left to die. He was unconscious, hit by a grenade. And we fell back and tried to retake the company at that time. There was a mound of graves. Up there, the Koreans had buried their dead, but they put them on top of the ground and built mounds over the top of them. And it was hand-to-hand combat that night because they were already in with us, and we were fighting hand-to-hand with bayonets and stuff.
Now, you said you heard the rifle fire, and then did you hear the horns or the bugles?
Yeah, oh yeah, hollering, bugles and horns, then whistles.
What did that sound like?
Mm-hmm.
What did it sound like?
Oh, it's kind of scary. Never heard that before.
And then it was communicated to you that the Chinese were here.
Yes, that's when, we knew that we were,
But you didn't know how many or...
No, didn't have any idea. Till the next morning, we had some kind of idea. We started counting them and picking up our dead.
And at the time, was it a pitch black night where you really couldn't see anything out there?
Yeah, it was pitch black, yes. Mm-hmm.
Now, you came out of that house and joined your squad?
Yes. Yes. We fought our way back to the battalion CP command post and secured it.
So tell me about that. Tell me about once you joined your men, what you were having to deal with.
After we secured the command post, Captain Bryant, at that time we had a 50 caliber machine gun, a 30 caliber machine gun, and we had captured another 30 caliber machine gun from the Chinese. And it was all chromed. We set that up, command post. We had 2 machine guns in the back and 1 in the front. And there was a ravine that runs up from the bridge. We pulled our 2.5-ton truck with our ammo right there where we could almost step out and get it from the command post because it was lower.
And so, when you guys set up these machine guns, was Chinese already running by and?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Could you see them at the time?
Oh, yes. My gosh, yes. They were all over the place.
And what was kind of going through your head?
I'm sorry?
What was kind of going through your head at the time?
Yeah, this is a full-blown attack. In fact, some of our weapons were tracers. We could see the tracers going into them. But it was still kind of a confusion because the rifle companies had been coming back into our area. And we still didn't know, you understand what I'm saying, who the enemy was at that time. And if you hollered halt and they didn't stop, they were dead.
So you had Chinese and Americans coming back?
Both at the same time, yes.
And how were you, were you able to tell to actually see, or did you just communicate an order to stop?
Yeah, we'd holler halt to them. And I hope the South Korean knew what halt meant.
Was your whole squad with you at the time?
No, we were scattered at that time.
So
I ended up with just my interpreter that night.
And who was the other guys manning the machine guns from a different
Yes.
squad?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, different squads, yes.
Same headquarters company,
Yeah.
though?
Mm-hmm.
So, was there any illumination being sent out by artillery to light up
By
the
flares? But you mean by flares?
Mm-hmm.
No, not that night, no. I don't remember any flares coming in at that night. After that, we did have flares, though.
So, how many Chinese, for the people who don't know, is there a way you can describe the numbers, or how many were you able to, now you said, did you get into hand-to-hand combat?
Mm-hmm.
So was that what would they try to shoot at you, or would they try to just engage in hand-to-hand combat?
Try to shoot at you. But I found that night there was mostly, if you saw one, there was another one in pairs. That's what I observed that night. That's when I asked my interpreter, what do they holler? And he says, I don't know. It's not Korean. So I knew then that we were fighting the Chinese, and then after we saw the garb they were wearing, you could distinguish the Chinese from our troops.
Do you know about what time it was?
I would say about 1 o'clock. The fire had died down. Everybody was asleep until that happened. I would say about 1 o'clock. That lasted from 1 o'clock till daylight.
And there was firing going on
all night.
over.
All night, yes.
What did it sound like? Just like a large battle was going on?
Just like you'd be observing the fireworks at a rally or something, or a celebration.
And at what did at a certain point the Chinese ever stop coming?
I would say the initial wave, it kind of slacked off during the end. Then I guess the rest of the night was probably probing. I think they had, after the first initial thought that they hadn't succeeded, I think they sort of slacked off and knew that, we had regrouped during the night. And After that, I think we pretty much held ourselves.
Did you guys have any problems with ammunition or weapons
No,
firing?
no, we had, I never had any problem with my ammunition or my weapon. My weapon was always in the sleeping bag with me for warmth. Had trouble with my canteen. It froze and busted, but not, and food.
So, once daylight came, what did you see?
When daylight came, the enemy left us. But usually they would leave maybe a sniper inside of our perimeter. And we didn't know this at the time. And then they'd get one or two of us before we could get them again. That happened most ever the first 2 nights. Then we got aware of what they were doing. And when daylight came, the Chinese went back to their original positions from attack positions. And we went out and started picking up our dead. Chinese were all over the place. The tracers had gone through them and set their clothing on fire. And they were just laying there smoldering like a fire that's trying to light.
The snipers, did they play dead, like lay down?
I don't know. Usually they'd be behind them, maybe a rock or something. And the next morning, the mess got up, fixed a hot meal for us. We got in line and had a hot meal from the mess sergeant.
How many Chinese were on, like how many bodies were there on the ground?
I don't know the exact count. I don't know whether anybody else does or not.
What did it look? Did it look like a lot, or was it?
Oh yes, yeah. It caused the Chinese quite a few men that night.
Was it? Now, were they using mortar rounds also at that time?
Well, they might have been using what they call the 60 millimeter mortar, a small mortar that you can carry real light. But most of their weapons were Thompson submachine guns. They had the Thompson submachine gun, 2 different types of Thompson submachine guns, 45 caliber.
So that's what they were mainly using, not the burp.
Yeah, and in fact, the next morning, most of us could have had one if we'd have wanted it. But they told us not to use them because it makes a different sound than what our weapons does, and we didn't want our people to think that they had already broken through again. But we did use their 30 caliber machine gun.
Which was also a U.S.-made weapon.
U.S.-made weapon, yes.
Now, you said one of them was chromed. I've heard that before. Why would they chrome a weapon? I never did. You said one of the 30 caliber machine guns was chromed?
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that before with the Thompson. There would be some Thompsons.
Yeah, but this was a 30 caliber machine gun chromed that we set it up and defended our position with it.
Do you know why they chromed it?
I don't have any idea. It must have come out of a museum or something, yeah. Mm.
More of a showpiece that they ended
Yeah.
up taking.
Mm-hmm.
Because something like that, I would think, would reveal your position, reflect light, and
Mm-hmm.
really it would be.
The only trouble we had with our machine guns, we had one 30 caliber that was water cooled, and they had to fire it every once in a while to keep it from freezing, the water in it from freezing.
So, once daylight came, were you able to find the rest of your squad?
I'm sorry?
Once daylight came, were you able to find the rest of your squad?
Oh yes. Yeah, that's when we started digging in. There was not going to be a jump off the next morning. That changed overnight. So we knew then we were going to have to hold.
And did your platoon sergeant tell you this?
Yes, yes. And we started digging in. We had real good foxholes then. It didn't take us long to get into the dirt.
Now, what was his tone like when he kind of communicated those orders? Was it, what was?
Well, they said this is as far as we're going. We're going to have to holdout here. We'd had contact with 32nd. They had been attacked also, and we couldn't move. We were pinned in. We knew that already. Daylight came, we could see the Chinese on the hills looking down at us. They had us outnumbered, they had the high ground, and there's no way we could get out of this except defend ourselves.
So you could look up and you could see just Chinese.
Oh, all day. All day.
Just
In fact, if somebody shot at them, we'd tell them, don't do it, because that would usually return fire. They would see us, we'd see them. They knew where we were. They knew where to attack at night. They knew where each position was. They had the high ground looking down at us all day.
did it seem like an endless number of them up on the mountains?
No, you couldn't see too many of them, but you knew, you could see them moving. But the next morning we had air support come in and napalm some of the mountains there, but that didn't do very good. You usually see them, the ones that survived it would run up and get warm by the napalm.
Now, you rejoined up with your squad. Did you bring them together, sit in a position?
What we did, I positioned them around the CP command post, dug in.
And that's what your job was, to protect
Yes.
the CP.
In fact, we had enough buildings there. I think we were in the barn area. This must have been a farm, and we were in the barn area, but I think we were probably sleeping in the home. But the CP was in the barn area.
Now, was each one of your U.S. soldiers assigned to a HQCo? Was it a buddy system?
Yes, two, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So there was two in a foxhole? Is that
Mm-hmm.
how you broke it up?
Yeah, we didn't have quite two for each one we had.
So you're saying that there wasn't always two in a foxhole. Sometimes there'd just be one guy.
Yeah, I think we only had to dig one foxhole while we were there. And that was between us and the 57th Field Artillery.
That's because the Marines had already dug.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I think the only foxholes that had been dug was up where the 32nd Infantry was, or maybe the high ground. Maybe the rifle companies maybe had already had foxholes dug. I'm not sure. I didn't know because I didn't see that part where they were. The only part I saw was where we were, the headquarters company battalion, command post.
So what was the guys in your squad, were they communicating anything to you? Were they asking any questions? What was their...
No. This was strictly business. They knew we were going to have to fight.
Now, were the guys in your squad, were they younger?
Oh yes, yeah, they were younger. Yeah, I would say 18, 19 years old. Yeah.
Did you get to know them any better by that point? Did you know where they were
No,
from? Or?
no, I didn't. I didn't even get to know where they were from. I know I had one Spanish kid, and that's the only one I can,
Like Hispanic Spanish?
Yeah.
I bet he wasn't used to that cold weather at all. What about, even though you weren't around them, did you know, like, how the HQCos reacted that night?
What?
Now, even though you were with your translator, but did you know how the HQCos reacted that night? Were they still around? Did they run off? Or?
After that, I don't know, because we didn't have any around the command post. Where they went that night, I don't know. Whether they may have been taken prisoner, or they may have tried to escape to get out of the thing. If they tried to escape, they probably got killed, because we were surrounded.
So the 6 South Koreans you had were gone after
Yes.
the first night?
Yes.
Was that pretty typical around the whole 31st?
That I don't say that they were gone. My interpreter did. My interpreter stayed with me that night.
But they could have been with another company or something
Yes.
else,
Mm-hmm.
possibly.
Yes.
Now, you said Daybreak came, and you guys were served. You know, they set up the mess sergeant. They cooked a meal.
Yes.
Now, they got the meal, did it freeze right on you? Did it, the food, did it freeze as soon as you got it?
Oh, yes. Oh, no. No, it didn't. No, it wasn't. I don't think it was near as cold at that time.
So it was actually warmer than at the Fuson Reservoir.
Yes, yes, it was, yes. Mm-hmm.
But you were still dealing with the same.
Yeah, it was still cold, but it was eaten before it was frozen.
So what was it like dealing with, how did you get water if your canteen was freezing and things like that, dealing with?
Usually we try to fire our we had little kerosene things to put on. I think you call it coal oil, I believe, instead of kerosene, or maybe the same.
What happened that day, the day after the attack? What did you guys do?
The day after, on the 28th, we prepared for the worst. We got ready. We were determined that they would not penetrate our lines again, and as long as we stayed up there, they never did. On the 28th, just as soon as it got dark, they tried. All night they tried. But what Captain Bryant would move us from one side of the CP to the other. Oh, they're coming down this hill. So we'd go over there. No, they're coming down the other way again. We'd go over there. Or they're coming down the railroad tracks. This was all night transferring back and forth to our base of fire.
Rotating the squads around.
Yes. Yes. I think Captain Bryant and Lieutenant Menard should have been decorated.
So they were basically.
They held us together. They're the ones that held us together there at the CP. We had higher ranking officers, but them two were outstanding. Captain Bryant was a World War II veteran of France, and he was a marvelous guy. In fact, he come into our company too up in North Korea, also at the Fuji Reservoir.
And Bryant was with. You said he came in at the Fuji Reservoir.
Yeah, he was with one of the line companies.
Okay.
And they pulled him out of the line company to bring him to our company commander of the headquarters company.
As in like a communications line company? Is that what?
Yes.
Who were just out and they joined with the 31st?
Yeah.
Okay. So now this time you said that they were able to send out flares the night of the 28th. Were they able to send out flares the night of the 28th?
No.
So it was still dark.
Yeah, everything became dormant at that time. Nothing. It was strictly a defensive position.
So basically, you guys would fire on any kind of movement.
Yes.
About how far could you see? Like 50 yards?
The night of the 28th, it snowed real bad. But you could see maybe 30 or 35 yards through it. You could see the Chinese through it when they were attacking you.
Was it similar where it started out, the attack with rifle fire, then the bugles?
Same old thing again, whistles, bugles, horns, screaming.
But you guys were ready for it this time.
We held her on that night, yes.
Was there any other kind of preparation that day on the 28th to kind of, besides digging in, was there any kind of other things? Was there gathering of ammunition?
Yeah, cleaning weapons, make sure they were ready, getting orientated by talking to each other. Here, this is your line of fire. This is over here is your line of fire. You got to protect this side, this area. You got to protect this area over here.
Did you guys have any kind of mortar support, artillery support that you were able to help you guys?
We had support with the 57th Field Artillery. They gave us close support. They had the twin 40s. They had the 50s with AAA up there with them, and that was and 105 howitzers. They were firing point blank. The first time in my life I ever heard one fire and it go off 2 seconds later.
Now, were they behind you firing in front of you?
No, they were on the side of us.
So they were protecting your flank.
Yeah, they were protecting the flank. Yes.
But you were able to see them firing.
Yes, we could see them. Yes. Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
Unbelievable. When you ever see a twin 40 firing point blank, you can cut down a forest in no time with them.
And that's basically what was coming at them. Essentially, was just a forest of Chinese.
Yes. Mm-hmm. That's what the Chinese wanted most instead of us. Was them twin 40s knock them out.
I was talking about preparations.
Yeah, the first night on the morning of the 27th. That was when I first was wounded. I had my rifle shot out of my hand.
On the morning of the 27th?
On the morning of the 28th.
Oh.
Yeah. Lost that finger and had the ski glove on. I never took that ski glove off until the 2nd December. But it was so cold that the blood froze and it didn't bleed.
Now, were you in a foxhole yourself?
No.
So you were out going between your men?
Yeah. What we did is we set up logs around the command post there. We had 3 huts. We had one hut where we put the wounded, the walking wounded. We had one that was empty, and we had one lean-to, and had straw around, and this is and logs, and we were pretty able to take cover and fight behind him. Like.
So you built some kind of a
Yes.
cover.
Yes, we could lay behind them and just put the machine gun barrel over the top of them.
Now, going back to the day of the 27th, after daylight broke, was there a lot of American wounded?
A lot of
first attack?
A lot of what?
American wounded, a lot of American soldiers that first attack?
Oh yes, yeah. We went out the next morning and picked them up. Their bodies were already frozen, and we just laid them in like a wood pile on top of the ground there by RCP, and quite a few, yes. And there was more taken prisoners than wounded.
Now, and the Chinese were also frozen too.
Oh yes, yeah.
Now, did you guys ever? I've heard a couple instances of actually using the Chinese bodies to stack them up as kind of.
Yes, mm-hmm. We did. Yes.
Now, now for someone that's not familiar, what did they look like when they're frozen? Is it just a?
Yeah, you're just black. Yeah. And stiff. You can take 2 men can pick up like a piece of wood.
So, the night of the 28th is when you were wounded, right? You were shot.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What? Kind of tell me about that time period. What was going on, what you were doing, what you remember, and when you were.
Well, we were fighting our way back to the command post from where we were. We were down the hill from the command post. We were fighting our way back up through there.
Now, were you having to pull back?
Yes. Yeah. Our job was to protect the battalion command post, but also to have our ammunition there by it. And that's where our ammunition was, in a 2.5 ton truck. sitting by the command post.
So you guys would go out, start out a ways away, and then once the ammunition depleted, you would have to work back?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's why you came back, was ammunition?
Yeah. And then, but after the first night we were overrun, then we stayed where the ammunition was. We had already pulled back. Because our tracers had set the home on fire and burned it down that night.
Now, was there multiple homes that caught on fire? Did it?
No, just one. Just one.
Now, did any of the Chinese gather around that
No.
house?
No, that was too close to us.
Because I've heard a couple of stories where a hut caught on fire and they would just stop and stand around the fire. They would just stop fighting just to keep warm.
Yes, I've heard that too. I've read that in some of the articles.
So the night of the 28th, you were with your men, and kind of tell me about what was going on then, right before you got shot.
Yeah, we were. They were attacking again. At dark. When darkness fell, that's when the whistles and the bugles and the horns would start blowing and screaming, attacking us again. And that night we had everything ready for them. Well, I think they never overran us again. They would get close, enough to throw a grenade maybe, but they never made it to penetrate us again. When I was wounded was when I was falling back to the CP on the first night. That was up close combat.
So what were you standing up, or were you down when you?
No, I was standing up.
So kind of explain to me, since what's that like being wounded?
I, be honest with you, I didn't even feel it. Didn't even know it.
But it did hit your rifle.
That's the only part I knew. I knew I didn't have a rifle. I knew I had splinters instead of a rifle.
So explain to me what you kind of have to do after that.
Well, I had a carbine. After that, I got an M1 rifle. Because if we're going to fight hand-to-hand combat, I want a bigger weapon with a bigger bayonet on it. That's what I had.
So that night, was there any difference between that night and the first night?
Oh yes, yeah. It was, their penetration was more, I think they could probably see our weak points from up on the mountains, up on top of the mountain. And I think we pretty well had it covered. Penetration after penetration, but they couldn't do it. After that, we found out that we actually were fighting a whole division of Chinese plus reinforcements. And at first, people didn't think it was that many Chinese attacking us. But actually, later on in the war, we found out that it was the Chinese 80th Division that was attacking us. Instead of going to Hagaroo, they stopped and fought us. If they'd have bypassed us and went on to Hagaroo, they'd have probably captured Hagaroo. And I think we can fairly well say that if we hadn't held there wouldn't have been any place to fall back to.
So at night, were you seeing, were the bodies starting to stack up on the night of the 28th?
Yes, it kept getting, each night it kept getting worse. The pile out there kept getting bigger. And the 31st at that time, the 32nd, had decided maybe they better come back to fall back with us. Colonel Faith gave the order to move out. I think it was on the 28th. I'm not sure. I think it was the evening of the 28th that they started falling back into our position. And on the morning of the 29th, I think is when he arrived there.
And McLean was still with you at that time, right?
No, McLean had already been taken prisoner. He had been wounded on the ice, and he had died while he was prisoner. I think that next day.
Was that on the 28th?
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
So did you see him at the reservoir?
No, I didn't. No.
But on the 28th is when they came into your guys' perimeter. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you see them come in?
Who? The 32nd?
The 32nd.
Oh yeah, yeah. They had to come across a bridge. They had to cross a bridge to get to us, and they could only come one at a time. Because if one got knocked out, then they'd all be stuck on the bridge. So they'd come across the bridge one at a time. Plus they'd be being fired upon. And there's a couple of people that wrote the 32nd when they were falling back to us, that they looked across and they saw the Chinese attacking us. And they said it was the awfulest thing they ever saw in their life. Looked like that we were done. Looked like we had been completely annihilated when they got back to us.
The 32nd, once they saw you guys?
Yeah, they saw us, from across the valley looking. And they could see Chinese coming down the hills from all directions.
And so were they attacking you during that time?
Oh, yes. Yeah, they were trying. Yeah. They thought they had us where they're on the ropes.
So in actuality, how was the situation at that point?
Yeah, it was gradually deteriorating. Our position was. Our position was we were almost ineffective.
Was a lot of the leadership gone at that time?
Well, a lot of the officers had been killed. Yes.
Now, kind of explain to me how did all these high-ranking officers get killed or wounded so early in the fight?
Well, one thing, an officer has to try to rally his troops, get them together. And doing that, you're exposed. Now, like Colonel Riley, he was at the command post. They had broken through, and after they broke through us, he was there by himself. Him and another officer, I know the other officer got killed. Colonel Riley later wrote that the other officer was trying to reach in and pull out his .45. And Colonel Riley looked over at him, and the officer's hand had been shot off. But he was still trying to get his .45 out with the hand had been shot off. And Colonel Riley had been wounded 3 times and knocked out with a concussion grenade. I talked to Colonel Riley in the Osaka Army Hospital after that when I went back to the hospital, and he explained a lot of things to me that I didn't know because, just officer to enlisted man.
Do you remember some of those things that he was talking about?
No, he just talked about our experiences there, and he was Colonel Riley was airlifted out by helicopter. Him and Colonel Embry had both been wounded. Colonel Embry had the 57th Field Artillery. He was a field artillery officer. They were evac out together, and I think the helicopter came in and got one more load, and that was it. The rest we had to try to get out by truck.
Now, when the 32nd came in, did they just kind of disperse in the kind of weaker positions?
I don't know what Colonel Faith did with them. We held our own position there.
Did you ever see Faith when he came into that?
No, I didn't. No. I don't remember Colonel Faith ever coming to the command CP. I think he set up his own command post. I think he saw Colonel Riley, and Colonel Riley told him, it's going to be your baby from here on in. You're going to have to do it. Colonel Riley couldn't do it because he was going to go to the hospital.
Now, on what day did the breakout start?
The breakout started on the 1st of December, around noon.
So, the 32nd came on the 28th or the 29th?
Yes. I think the dates, I'm not sure, either the 28th or 29th, maybe the 28th. We held out there, and I think Colonel Faith made the decision on the 1st of December, we're going to fall back to Haggeroo. That's when it became Task Force Faith.
So was there much difference in those two nights that before you guys broke out than the other nights?
Well, there was a lot of fights, but we had more bodies to return fire with the 32nd Infantry being with us. I don't think if the 32nd hadn't been with us, we wouldn't have been able to hold out that one more night.
So did you ever have a medic look at your wound?
Oh yeah.
What did so did you go back to like an actual like a medic?
Oh no, I never had a medic. No, never had a medic look at me until the 2nd December. In fact, I was wounded again on the way out at the first roadblock, at the first blown bridge. But I have, with all the wounds that I have, only one time. That was on the 2nd December.
Did you ever go
at the Marine Aid Station.
Did you ever go to any of the medical areas where they were working on the wounded?
Oh yes, yeah, I went through that process.
At the reservoir?
No.
Oh, okay. Afterwards.
No, at the Haggeroo,
Okay.
where they were working on the wounded there. Yeah.
So, was the nights before you broke out? Was they pretty much the typical where the Chinese would come?
It was pretty much typical every night. Yes. Yes, the nights were pretty much the same. Dark, you fight. Daylight, it slacks off.
Was your squad? Was any of them wounded? Were they all still together?
You know, I don't know. I have not seen any of them on the roster, the Chosin Reservoir roster, or I don't know exactly what happened to them.
So, you got the order that you guys were going to break out back to Haggeroo.
My platoon leader, Lieutenant Bernard, came over and said, we're going to break out. We're going to be the rear guard. That turned out to be a disaster.
So, tell me about that. Tell me, once that order was given, what happened?
Well, once the main column moves out, that leaves us exposed. The Chinese have got more time to come in on the rear because we've already lost some of our firepower. They've already moved out. In fact, the Chinese joined us on the road. They had the high ground, we had the road, and then the reservoir. The road was right by the reservoir. The Chinese were firing down into our trucks with the wounded and the dead, and we couldn't escape. They were coming down the road behind us. Some of our people didn't even have a weapon. Why, I don't know.
When your platoon leader said we're going to be rear guard.
Yeah.
What was going through your head at that time?
That was something, I don't know. We were already in a position where we were combat ineffective.
Now, by combat ineffective, what do you mean?
I mean, to be combat effective, you have to do everything together. This was a situation where it wasn't together. You were trying to defend. You were trying to save yourself. And by the time we pulled out, the 32nd Infantry had already reached a certain point, the roadblock, and they called in air support, which we were already there. And the air support came in, and hit the front of the column with napalm. That was a disaster. That really,
Now, you didn't actually get to see that, though.
no, this was ahead of us. But the rumor got back what had happened, back through the line. But I could see the plane coming in across the ice, yes. And I could see it drop the napalm, but I didn't know it hit our men.
Now, you said it got back to you. Did someone just say, hey, they hit
Hey, our front has been wiped out by our own plane.
What did you think at that time?
That wasn't a good thought. And then when we got to the bridge, it had been blown. Now, what do we do now?
So what did you guys do?
Well, they had a machine gun, the Chinese had a machine gun set up where they were firing from the left down through the bridge. Our trucks were setting up on the road. They were all exposed. All the drivers, every time a driver would get in, he was killed. We couldn't get across it. So I think one of the officers finally decided we had to pull them across, pull each truck across individually, bypass the road.
Across the frozen river.
Yes, yes.
Now, since you guys were rear guard, you were the last ones to move out. Did you help load up any of these trucks?
Yes, yes.
With wounded or ammunition?
With wounded.
What
We had our ammunition truck with us, yes.
Explain to me about that, about loading the wounded and how you did
All
it.
that. We tried to get as much in as we could. We didn't have enough room for the dead. There was no way we could bring the dead out. If there was wounded, they were put in a truck. If they couldn't walk, if they could walk, they weren't put in a truck. But we had people up there with frozen feet. I mean, they were frozen, just like they'd come out of they were ice cubes. They were walking barefooted, no shoes.
Our soldiers?
No shoes.
Our U.S. soldiers?
Our U.S. soldiers.
What happened to their shoes?
No shoes. The enemy had attacked them, and they didn't have time to put their boots on. I saw one kid when I got to Hagaru, was in the room with me. His feet was completely just a rock. Next time I saw him was at Osaka, Japan. His feet were gone.
Now, you loaded, about how many wounded did you get in a truck?
As many as we could. Sometimes I've read where they tried to stack them in double deck. I never saw that. But we just, as many as we could lay in a truck. That was the way it was.
Do you remember how the guys, the wounded, what they were saying? Were they just quiet? Were they...
Yeah, oh yes, they were suffering, yeah. I don't think the morphine, I think, froze. They had to, according to the story now, I don't know this, but the medics had to keep the morphine in their mouth to keep it from freezing. And they would take it out of their mouth and administer it to the patient.
Now, since you guys were in the rear, the column was set up, they moved out,
Mm-hmm.
and basically what happened? Were the Chinese starting to come down as soon as they...
Oh yeah. Yeah, they were there before we left. Yeah, we had small arms mortar fall in on us. Yeah, that was when I got hit in the legs with mortar shell and 60 millimeter mortar. I think one major got killed in that.
Now, so you guys were they'd start coming down from the hills. Were they already right there in where?
Oh yeah, we were fighting before the rear end of the column pulled out.
And how many guys was there to kind of cover this rear? 100? Less than that?
In the rear guard?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would say 50 to 60, I would say. Including officers.
And they were probably being wounded as they were...
Yeah. Everybody couldn't stay in the rear guard. We had to have people all through the convoy to protect it, especially from the high ground.
Now, the people driving the trucks, were they the ones that have always been driving it, or did other men have to get in and drive the trucks?
Yeah, finally we just get people in there to drive them, you know, if we could knock out a machine gun. We had a lot of air support, but we started out about 1 o'clock, and by the time we got to the first roadblock, it was getting dark by the time we got through it.
Now, the air support was provided by Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever see him?
No.
How was the air support?
I'd say it was good until dark. Then after dark, it was disaster. But we took Hill 1121, and by the time the Chinese were on top of Hill 1121, by the time they got to the top of the hill, the twin-engine bomber had came around and bombed our own men again and hit our men.
You said 1121 or 1221?
1221.
Okay.
That was the first mountain we had to go up after the roadblock.
So, to kind of get an idea of how long the column was, when they were at 1221, were you still on the other side of the first blown bridge, or had you crossed it at that time?
I had already crossed it.
About how long was the column, would you say?
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. I know about how long it was when it ended up about 25 trucks, the last destination. I stayed with the convoy until 3:30 in the morning. We left at 1 o'clock, and I was still with the convoy at 3:30. So that's almost 14 and a half hours to go 11, and we hadn't even gone, and was only 11 miles to Haggeroo. We fought all night. We took one vehicle would get knocked out. We'd try to take them out of it and put in another one. And that's when I was wounded again, but this time by a truck.
By a truck?
Yeah. We were taking them out of one truck, and another truck went by us and slipped over and hit the other truck and pinned me against it. Broke 3 ribs, punctured left lobe, busted my nose.
So basically sandwiched you?
I sandwiched me in between 2 trucks, yeah. And I couldn't breathe. I remember laying in a ditch trying to breathe. And finally it came back. I could do enough to get back up on my feet again and get back in the convoy. And I stayed with the convoy until we were out of ammunition.
So were you were still able to fight?
Yes. I had to. If you want to live, you have to fight when you're...
So you said when you guys, the breakout first started, you were wounded by a mortar round, a piece of shrapnel?
Yes.
Where'd that hit you at?
In the legs. Nothing serious. Just small shrapnel.
But slowed down your movement?
Mm-hmm.
And then once you were pinned by the trucks, how were you, like, combat effective wise? Were you really hurting at the time?
Oh yeah, I couldn't breathe. Punctured my left lobe. That's your left lung, of course, and then you know.
So that when you were pinned at the truck, was that when you were close to Hill 1221?
Yes, 1221 on the side of 1221.
So what happened after that?
Well, after that, I got up and got back into the convoy with them and trying to protect the trucker, the wounded in the trucks.
What was happening to the wounded in the trucks?
At that time, we were getting dispersed. We didn't know each other. The convoy got mixed up, When the front stopped, the back kept moving. Pretty soon we were all together. Pretty soon we passed the front. Some of the rear into the front.
How slow was it moving?
Very slow. In fact, it stopped right after we started moving. First roadblock. That's when the napalm came in and opened it up, but that's, you know.
What was kind of going through your head at the time? Did you feel that you were going to make it out, you weren't?
Well, we figured we had a 50-50 chance. I talked to my platoon leader, Lieutenant Bernard. He said 50-50 maybe. I think we probably done maybe more than that. I think right now there's 8 of us out of my company on the list that belong to Chosin Reservoir. That's not too bad out of 55 years ago.
So you were pinned by the trucks, and then you continued to keep trying to keep the Chinese from attacking. Were they just shooting into the trucks?
Oh yeah, they were shooting in the trucks. Yeah, they were after the drivers. Yeah, they were knocking the trucks out right and left.
So,
A driver was, his life was short in that breakout.
So tell me a little bit about that. Once a driver would get wounded, what would happen?
Well, you'd have to move him over and get someone to do it. It was hard to find a volunteer to do it.
What was that like? Did one of the commanding officers ask for a volunteer? And
No. Usually somebody would do it on their own. Hey, we got to get this truck out of here. Nobody had to say, you know, let's get in there and get it done. Or let's knock out that machine gun nest first.
So how long, I mean, was there times where no one would get into a truck?
Oh yeah. Yeah, there was time, you know. Sometimes the truck would be stuck. Or, overheated or something, or wouldn't move, been knocked out. So you try to get the wounded out of it into another truck, which actually we're putting wounded on wounding if you wanted to get them out. This was a disaster.
Was the Chinese actually getting to the trucks at that point?
No. The Chinese weren't getting on it until about 3:30 in the morning. It's when the Chinese overran the trucks. At that time, we were out of ammo. Didn't know where my ammo truck was. It might have already been knocked out itself. We didn't know whether, we were constant, what should we do now? Here we are with all these wounded in the truck, no ammo. Do we attack the Chinese without ammo? Or what do we do?
So
nobody had to make the decision. We were either going to be taken prisoner or killed right there. So I ended up with about 8 people leaving. Must have been about 4 o'clock in the morning. We ended up in a little lumber town by the name of Sassu. There, and a Korean person in that home there had a nice big fire inside of his home. And we all went in and got warm. And he told us the Chinese were all over the place. So we went on over, got warm and went on over the mountain. And I arrived at Hagaru about 7 o'clock in the morning. Just getting daylight.
now, did you travel out with your squad or just a random group of men?
Just a random group of men.
So,
It had become a completely disaster evac.
your platoon leader, did you know where he was at the time?
No, I did not see my platoon leader after that.
So you said you end up leaving around like 4 in the morning.
Yes.
What right before you guys decided to leave, what was kind of going on? What was happening?
Yeah, the Chinese had overrun the trucks, throwing white phosphorus grenades in on the wounded. If they were alive, they'd shoot them.
And you guys didn't have any ammunition.
We didn't have any way to, no, didn't have any way to protect them. No.
So you arrived at this Korean house. What was that like to come out of that situation, to have, you know, this Korean person greet you and let you into their house?
That was very interesting. Yeah, it was 4 o'clock in the morning. He had up and a big fire going. Of course, he might have been ahead of the lumber mill. You never know. But felt good to get inside, just even if it was 10 or 15 minutes.
Did he speak English?
No.
So did you have a translator with you?
No. He got the message through to us. I know he said Chinese, and I knew, you know. Well, we knew Chinese were there anyway, so.
So the North Korean people knew that you guys were there to help them. They didn't really.
Oh yes, in fact, some of the refugees were in our column. I can see today that child on the back of his mother looking me straight in the eyes to go out. He was probably 6 or 7 months old, and he looked at me straight in the eye. I'll never forget that look.
And this was with the breakout. They just.
Yes, she was right in there with us, carrying her little one on her back.
About how many refugees were with that column? Do you know?
I don't have any idea. In fact, I don't even know where they came from. I don't remember seeing them in our perimeter up there.
Once you got to the lines at Hagaruri, were you given a halt? Asked for a password, or
No.
you just walked right into the?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we reached the Marine lines about 7 in the morning. They told us to halt. You're coming through a minefield. And they came out and escorted us in through it and took us to the first aid station, where the Marine Medical Corps took care of me and loaded me on an airplane that morning, December the 2nd.
And that's when you were flown out that morning.
I was flown to Hamnung, yes. And that afternoon, I was put on another plane. And on the evening of December the 2nd, I was in the Osaka Army Hospital.
What was the flight out like? Did you just, do you remember much about that?
Of
The flight out, do you remember much about that?
when I got on an airplane at Hagaru, I don't even remember the plane taking off. I saw a bunch of parachutes laying behind, and I remember laying down on them. Don't even remember the plane taking off. I don't even remember the plane leaving.
So, did you have an idea of what had happened to the rest of the column? Did you know?
No, I don't. No. The only thing I know is what I've read, that what happened to it. That's.
So what did you think had happened?
I don't. I knew that they'd never make it. I thought maybe they'd be all prisoners. According to this Colonel Beale of 1st Marine Division, he got some of them off the ice. I know that. Whether they came out of the trucks or not, I don't know. But I know he went onto the ice and got a few of them.
Yeah, I read about that.
Yeah.
What was your welcome home like to the United States? What was your welcome home like to the United States?
Great. It was great to be home. They flew me into Camp Stoneman, and from there I went to Letterman Army Hospital. But it felt good to be home. It was Letterman Army Hospital was fantastic.
Was there a greeting there? Was there people there, a band, or?
No, I didn't know what the people here were saying. In fact, it didn't make any difference what they were saying to me. I think the headline saying we were badly defeated at the Reservoir,
Now,
that we were annihilated, but we were just ran out.
when were you able to go home?
I stayed at the Osaka Army Hospital until I was ready to come home. I stayed at the Army about 6 months, and I had enough points to be the first one to come home.
And what was that like going home?
Great, great. We flew all the way home. Yeah.
Where was that?
Hmm.
Where was that? Where was home?
Home, Louisville, Kentucky.
Now, did you come home to your parents, any brothers and sisters? Or?
Parents, brothers and sisters, yeah.
So, did you have any friends back there still around, or?
Well, my mother, what a coincidence is, my mother got a telegram, December the 7th, 1950, that her son had been wounded. I thought, December the 7th? What a day that was, huh? Pearl Harbor Day.
Did you have any friends still around Louisville?
Not really, not really.
So did anybody ask where you've been, what had been going on?
No. Just back out into society again for a couple of months and then re-enlisted.
How'd that make you feel, that no one really asked about or cared what was going on?
I didn't worry about that. I was regular Army. This was my job. I asked for it. In fact, I transferred down to Fort Polk, Louisiana to train the Ohio National Guard, the 37th Division, to get them ready to go to Korea. And I took a look at them and said, they're not ready either. At that time, our National Guard didn't have the training that they do now. They've beefed it up better, and they're more rigid in their training. The major don't call the private by the first name anymore.
Do you think people back home understood what you guys were going through out there?
I don't think so. Some do and some don't. I can understand this situation. It's hard to read about where 4 or 5 get killed and something like that. And you got a mother and a brother or sister or a husband or a wife, and it affects someone. And I still think of also the 8,000 that are still missing in Korea. That some of them, the fathers and mothers passed away and didn't know where their son was, and now they're bringing some of them home.
Do you think fighting in the Korean War changed you as a person?
I think so.
What did it change about you?
I think it gave me more perspective on life. I think before the Korean War, I was a little nonchalantly, I became a more serious person, I think, after the Korean War. How precious life was. When somebody's standing next to you and you see them lose it, it's not easy.
What do you think the world would have been like today if the Korean War hadn't been fought?
I don't know. Maybe we made a mistake by having 2 Koreas. Maybe we didn't have to do that, but we did. The only thing I can regret is this: we ended up where we started. And 37,000 lost their lives in 2.5 years. A stalemate for 37,000 people. If we're going to fight a war, let's win it.
But seeing the difference between the two countries now, that must give you some sense that what was accomplished.
Satisfaction, yes. The southern part, yes. The northern part, starving their people to death. They want to get out and they can't. The South is importing cars and technology, and at one time, if the North didn't want the South to have electricity, they'd turn it off.
If you had it to do over again, would you do anything differently?
I might not re-enlist in 1948.
Why do you think you survived?
Why do I?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know. I can't answer that. I know I was shot at, and I survived.
Were a majority of the guys, the soldiers that were with you, were they very young? Were there a lot of young?
Mostly our NCO and officers were World War II vets. The others were young, yes. If you were 26 or 27, chances are you were World War II.
Is there any humorous stories or things that you remember about your service in Korea?
Not really. Not really.
Do you remember any of the music, songs, any of that kind of stuff?
No. The first good song I heard from Korea was Nat King Cole. Yeah, Mona Lisa. That was real popular back then with Nat King Cole. And remember seeing a USO show at the Osaka Army Hospital. And
What they normally do at these USO shows is just singing, comedy.
seeing a little bit of comedy and singing and dancing. And first USO show I saw was in World War II. Kay Kaiser, the big band leader on Okinawa. But I didn't see any in Korea except made up of Army personnel. But they did have some after that. Bob Hope with Marilyn Maxwell and them, and people like that. But
Yeah, I met the son of one of those. You ever heard of Les Brown? And I think his band of Renowned, or I think it's Les Brown. But I think he played for like Frank Sinatra.
Les Brown? Yeah. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I met his son. He plays out in Branson.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did you ever write any letters home?
No. I think about the only thing I ever did. I wrote an email one time. Are you familiar with email?
I mean,
It's a little black letter that they give to all the people, all the personnel to write to their families, a little email. I don't know why they call it email. It's just to say hello, goodbye, and how are you. That's about.
when did you write that?
I wrote that in about, December 1950.
While you were at the reservoir, or
No,
after?
at the hospital.
At the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
What do you remember? What you wrote? What you said?
No, I don't know. But that was after I healed pretty good. But while the chaplain at the hospital wrote most of my letters home to my family. I couldn't write.
Now, do you remember, like, kind of, since you were close to the command post, did they have an idea that the Chinese were going to hit in that kind of a force, or was it pretty much a surprise to everybody?
Surprise. Has to be a surprise because Colonel Riley said we were going to jump off the next morning. we were going to attack on the morning of the 28th. And we were told that they weren't too many of them, just a few volunteers.
Is there any specific memory that sticks out to you the most about your experience at the reservoir?
I think the first night that we were attacked sticks out mostly in my memory. I'll never forget that.
What about it that sticks out?
That's just that thinking we were going to be home for Christmas, and here all at once the war is actually just now starting. And that kid on the back of its mother, I'll never forget that as long as I live. I can still see that face today on that little kid, and I wonder if they got out. I know we evacuated, I didn't say we, they did over 100,000. They put them on ships to get them out of North Korea, but whether that little one and his mother got out or not, I don't know.
Did you see many Korean people when you were over there?
No. No. Every city that I went through there mostly was destroyed, except Busan, Daegu, all of them were completely destroyed. Didn't see many at all.
What was the like the area like? What was their houses like? What was Korea like? Like the buildings and I mean.
Oh, I think it was way back in time. Way back in time. That's poorly built. Poorly built. It couldn't be like that now. No way. Primitive. Their transportation was what they call the A-frame, sets on your back. You've heard of that, I imagine. You carry things on your back with it in a frame.
Did you ever get Stars and Stripes when you were in North Korea?
Oh, yes.
What were they kind of saying about what was going on? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember. They mostly gave us up to dates. Yeah.
Why do you think the Korean War was forgotten?
Was forgotten. You know, I don't know. I think that it preceded a big one, and maybe people didn't realize that it was as large as it was until you read the casualties. I think 35,000 dead in 2 years, from June the 25th to 50 till 53. And I saw some of them, when they started turning our prisoners loose, I saw some of them in my company, their names that had been taken prisoner.
If you could describe the Chosin experience in one word, what would it be?
Never. You know what I mean? Never commit troops to a battle that is not prepared.
I think that's it. Is there anything else that you can think of that I didn't ask you?
No, I think that pretty well much describes it. Only thing I can say is that out of the campaign up there, you've read quite a bit about it. What, 16 Congressional Medal of Honors, 80-some Silver Stars. I think there would have been more if people would live to put other people in for it. I think definitely my company commander should have got something, and my platoon leader. They were the inspiration to me to, you know what I mean, to keep going. They gave the orders. They were confident. And Captain Bryant had been in World War II before, and he knew what combat was. And it was them that kept us going.
So, what is it, do you think, about their characters that was, I mean, was there something about them that kept them going, kept them headstrong?
Yeah, their maturity, I think. Their confidence. They never let on like, hey, we're going to get out of this. If we keep fighting, we will.
And that carries on through
Yeah,
this.
oh yes. The Chinese came in with one thing to do, destroy us, kill us. Their orders were to annihilate us, especially the 1st Marine Division. The only thing about it, we were with them.
Did you ever take any prisoners?
No. I've escorted prisoners, but I never took any, no. We did take prisoners the first night.
What do you remember about the Chinese, the prisoners? Do you remember?
I think they were just as happy to be a prisoner as they were. I think more of them would have if it had been more possible.
What did they look like? How did they carry themselves?
You know, we had one building we put them in, and that was it. Then we fed them. The 4.5 days we were up there, and that's it. They were in the building when we left. The Chinese got them back again, alive.
Now, you never ran into any allies, British or anything like that, right?
Our division had British commandos with them, but I didn't, personally.
The 7th?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Where at? I didn't know that.
The 2nd Battalion of the 31st Infantry fought with the British commandos from Coterie trying to get to Hagaroo.
Okay.
That was Colonel Drysdale.
Yeah.
Yeah, Operation, Colonel Drysdale.
I talked to a couple guys in North Carolina.
I think it was G Company, 2nd Battalion.
I was trying to think of the guy's name that I talked to who was with that. But it was a funny story because he was talking about how there was one of the British guys who was running a mortar and dropping the mortar shells and drinking tea at the same time. And he's like, hey, do you want some tea? And he's like, I don't want no tea.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of his name, who I talked to.
They called that,
McCready.
They called that Hellfire Valley, where they were ambushed, Yeah, some of the 7th was with them there,
Now, did you know, there was that whole tank company that was at the wood, did you guys...
That was Captain Drake's tank company.
Did you guys know about them being there at all? Did you have any idea?
If they would have been where we ended up that night, we would have got out with all of our wounded.
Yeah, that's what I've
But they had just pulled back the day before to protect Hagaroo. Captain Drake Tank Company, 31st Tank Company.
It was interesting hearing about how much trouble they had just trying to get the tanks,
See,
how they would throw tracks.
That's what happens when you don't have communication. If they would have launched their offensive to get us, and we would have launched our offensive to break out, we would have met each other and made it. But I think the Marine General thought that Hagaroo was better to protect with the tank company than to get us out. We'd have to do it on our own. I'm not criticizing him. I can understand. The 1st Division wouldn't have had any place to fight to if they didn't have Hagaru. Or we wouldn't have had a place to fight to if we didn't have Hagaru.
Yeah, they wouldn't. You guys wouldn't
Wouldn't
be
been
able
no-
to fly anybody out.
Yes.
Now, was there any enemy propaganda at the time? Were they on the they were
No.
using a loudspeaker?
No, no. The only thing with their bugles, horns, and whistles, and screaming. Well, to put it down, the 80th Division that attacked us up at the east of the reservoir there, we put them out of commission also. They were never able to launch another attack after we got through with them up there.
What did some of your squad? What did they say about being paired with the Katusas? What did they think about that?
I don't know. Yeah. You know, you see the movies all the time of the guys sitting around after a battle describing, what they're talking about. I've never seen that happen in a real war.
Where they actually talk about what they just went through?
Yeah. Yeah. You might talk about family or something like that, or might say where you're from or something like that, but that's about it.
So that was basically a lot of the conversations that were...
Yeah, that's very, very seldom, Everybody knew what they had to do.
Now, since you mentioned it, a lot of the movies that have been made and stuff like that, what is there that's missing about it that actually is in combat for us people that don't understand that?
What's missing about movies?
Yeah, is there something that's missing? I mean, just like you said, how they, they never really, people didn't really. Is there anything else that you kind of, when you watch these things, you're going, that's not really the way it was, or it was more like this?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it's quite a bit different. They made a movie about this, the Chosin Reservoir. In fact, Frank Lovejoy. I don't know, were you Frank Lovejoy or not?
Was this the Marine?
Frank Lovejoy played General Smith in it, and he's the one that said "Retreat Hell."
Is that the movie Retreat Hell?
Yeah,
I've seen that.
Retreat Hell. We're only fighting in the opposite direction.
And that was made in like the 50s.
I think so, something like that. Yeah, a long time ago. Yeah.
And what about it was different than really?
Oh, it was completely different than what I know. Of course, that was more or less a Marine film, I think. I don't think that time they knew the Army was up there.
Now, do you ever remember, do you remember any African Americans being with you guys up there?
What?
African American truck drivers? Did you ever see any of them?
No.
I think that's all of my questions.